So some other reform methods that the Catholic Church used during the Counter-Reformation are the use of inquisitions again. So we talked a little bit about inquisitions when we were talking about the Middle Ages. And so these inquisitions are basically the same thing. The Catholic Church established the Roman Inquisition to help to combat the Protestant Reformation. They tried people who were accused of being Protestant, practicing witchcraft, or breaking church law. But probably the Inquisition that you're most interested in is the Spanish Inquisition. Nobody ever expects the Spanish Inquisition, according to Monty Python. But the Spanish monarchs set up and controlled a much harsher Spanish Inquisition than that was imposed in England and in Rome. It imposed religious uniformity on Jews, Muslims, and Protestants. So if you weren't a Catholic, you were going down. And the torture methods that they used that we talked about last week, basically that on steroids. So they were inquisitioning so many people that it was almost like a torture factory. So they might be torturing more than one person in a room at a time. So it just gets kind of grody there. If you want to Google some images, you can, but I don't really have the time today. So we're just going to move on. Index of Forbidden Books. So the church also tried to stamp out religious rebellion by warning people not to read the books on the Index of Forbidden Books, or they would lose their souls. Yeah. Okay, so some religious effects of the Counter-Reformation is that Jesuits spread Catholicism to new places. So in North America, the Jesuits tried to soften the harsh colonial rule of the governments under which they worked, and especially under the rule of Christopher Columbus. So there were Jesuits who worked with Christopher Columbus, who worked under Christopher Columbus, to kind of soften the cultural differences between the Native Americans and Christopher Columbus, so that there weren't so many run-ins with each other. So that was one way that Jesuits tried to either spread Catholicism or just spread goodwill. Another effect of the Counter-Reformation is that the religious turmoil increased between Catholics and non-Catholics, but then also between different sections of non-Catholics. So the Calvinists denounced some of the Lutherans' ideas, and the Lutherans denounced some of the ideas of the Anabaptists, and people were just always at each other's throats about their beliefs. So while the 95 Theses is awesome and opened the doors for religious freedoms, people didn't really handle that freedom all that well, and it brought a lot of turmoil and discord and conflict to Europe. Oops. Alright, so persecution and hysteria. Sounds like a great time. The Jews and Muslims were viewed as heretics, like always, and around 1500 they were forced to either convert to Catholic Christianity or they needed to get the heck out of Spain. So most Jews did leave, and they resettled in Eastern and Southern Europe, which is why there's such a high population of Jewish people there today. And others were allowed to stay in the other parts of Europe, but they were confined to certain parts of the city known as the ghetto. So if you are familiar with the Holocaust, any at all, you'll remember that when Hitler was imposing some of the rules before he started doing the death camps, that Jews were confined to places in the city called ghettos. That was not a new idea. This is where that started. So that's kind of that persecution of different faiths, even like other faiths other than Christianity. So another thing that as an effect of the Counter-Reformation is hysteria. So across Europe, people feared that witches roamed the land, killed their children and cattle, and were in cahoots with the devil. So this is an actual fear that they had. This isn't This is serious as serious can be. And these fears increased in times of poor harvest or other hardships, so anytime that anything bad happened, people thought that witches were to blame. So an accident happens in the street and a horse runs into another horse, 2 people die, and the crops are ruined. It was because a witch did it. Or any other scenario you could think of that's bad, it's because a witch did it. So these heightened fears in times of hardships, like on top of already stressed out people, inspired hysteria, which meant that accused witches were rounded up and tried for their wrongdoings, their alleged wrongdoings, because the punishment for practicing witchcraft was death. So these alleged wrongdoings that the witches were supposedly doing, a lot of innocent victims were executed, and a lot of these victims were women, because they were seen as the brides of the devil. So this is a picture of a witch burning. You'll see over here that this man has a crucifix to protect himself from the witches. This is them. It looks like at least 5 or 6 women burning because of their wrongdoings, because of their witchcraft that they probably did not practice. But, you know, who am I to say what really went on? Alright, and this is the last slide. So the religious wars were also an effect of the Counter-Reformation, and in 1494 France invaded Italy, which began a series of wars where these 2 countries vied for control of the Italian peninsula. The only real significance of this Italian war that's long and drawn out and back and forth and doesn't really achieve anything is that it helped to spread Renaissance ideas through Europe. So soldiers brought Italian ideas home with them, and scholars and artists fled Italy because of the wars to other parts of Europe and, of course, took their ideas and talents with them. So another war is the Peasants' War. So peasants' exposure to new ideas under the Reformation meant that their dissatisfaction with high taxes and, that should be, lack of power increased. So Reformation preachers promoted individual freedoms, and that mixed with the long overdue rebellion that comes with dissatisfaction with high taxes and lack of power meant that in 1524 tens of thousands of peasants stormed the castle and the monasteries. Martin Luther was actually accused of beginning the rebellion, but he did not do it. He denounced the violence and said that the peasants were rob and rage and act like mad dogs. So his refusal to side with the peasants prevented that rebellion from becoming the social revolution that it could have been. And then the last bullet is the Peace of Augsburg in 1555. So we talked about yesterday how Charles V had been suppressing the Lutheran princes, and finally that war ended with the Peace of Augsburg. And he allowed, even though he wasn't at the treaty signing because he detested compromise on any level, the compromise allowed each Lutheran prince to choose the religion that their subjects would practice. Now, when we say that they can choose the religion, we mean that they can either choose Catholicism or Lutheranism. There is no in between. There is no other religions that they can choose. And subjects really had no say in the choice of which their prince would choose, but it still plants that seed of religious freedom, which will become very apparent as to why that is important to history in the next couple of units. Okay, so you have a test tomorrow on Thursday. I'm going to give you some organizers to help you review for that. It's in your packet. The first one, or there's 3. There's going to be the Venn diagram between the Northern Renaissance and the Italian Renaissance. And then there's the diagram that is the Protestant Reformation, and then there's one for the Counter-Reformation. You can do these, you cannot do these, I don't care, but you should be prepared for your test either way tomorrow because it's only 3 days worth of notes, so you should be good to go with those, even though it has been so quick. I won't see you again until after spring break, so I hope that all of you have a great Easter, a great spring break, and that you safely return when we're expected to. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to tell you. Oh, don't forget that your Renaissance and Reformation character maps are due tomorrow. We're not going to take any late ones, so if you don't bring it tomorrow, then it's a 0 in the grade book. If you have any questions, just ask. If you have any questions about the test tomorrow, just wait until Miss Knowles comes back tomorrow. She will answer any questions that you might have. So that's it. Thanks for listening, and just work on completing either your Renaissance and Reformation map or your what's the word? Your diagrams. Wow. Okay.